Welcome to the second half of the game where, as to be expected, it's time to able to do some more things. To begin with, let's begin with the forms of this particular final world in the whole entire game. Hey, what's up ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the one and only Maxi here once again, and I'm back for yet again for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos as always. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Nintendo Switch. So, last time, I believe we have managed able to complete done with the second cup in terms of the forms of the Colosseum, which appears to be the Ultimate Cup. And overall, it was actually pretty too easy, especially noticeable with the forms of double the amount of health I've got, and on top of all that stuff though with the copy ability upgrades and stuff like that. So yeah, as a result though, it was overall pretty easy, all things considered. So today, for this video, we're about to be getting started with the forms of the final world in the whole entire game, which appears to be Isolated Isles, Forgo Dreams. So to begin with, let's get into the first level on this world, which appears to be Forgo Plains. So, with the forms of the Isolated Isles, Forgo Dreams, think of like the forms of, let's just say, a combination of the forms of, although it's kind of like the equivalent to the forms of, I know exactly how do I explain this, because I know for the fact it has been about a very long time since I actually known about the forms of some alterations of certain levels, because as you can see, that as we stumbled across into this particular collectible, here we have ourselves the piece of the Leon's soul. And this actually represents about the fact that yes, we need to collect all of them, or to be more specifically, a certain amount of those Leon souls before you finish up the entire world, because if you don't collect enough of these, well, you have to backtrack for them and you have to collect them. So because of that though, yeah, because like I said before, we ended up on the second half of the game, so in this case though is the fact that we ended up on the final world in the whole entire game, because the reason why I say this is because, you remember guys, after the events of that normal ending that we've already went into? Well, basically it's the fact that you notice there was actually a to be continued scene where basically Leon just somehow managed to able to go trapped inside of this particular shield container, which actually means is the fact that that's the reason why this world exists. So as a result though, I kind of think about it though, is the fact that with the forms of Isolated Isles, Forgo Dreams, the entire world kind of reminds me of the forms of how the fact that in Crash Bandicoot 4 it's about time that it does manage to retain the inverted stages, where basically certain stages has been altered, and also at the same time though is the fact that they makes everything else, like specifically with all that gem collecting, might be a bit impossible to get, especially noticeable during the forms of Bear's repeating level, where I believe that one of those hidden gems is actually in a different place, as far as I can recall. Mind you, it has been a very long while since I actually managed to play Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time on the Switch, mainly because I'm busy playing other titles and stuff like that, including by the forms of, well, let's just say Mario Plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle and stuff like that, despite I still haven't completed that game yet, because obviously I'm still stuck on one of the hardest battles. And on top of all that stuff though, we are still waiting for Mario Plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope to hopefully get its release date, because after all that we've already sorted out with the forms of any other games release dates at this point right now, with all that, you know, Splatoon 3, as well as the forms of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, despite I don't usually care about the game as much as the next guy, but that's just me. But also, on top of all that stuff though, with the forms of, well, some other titles here and there as well. Mind you, still no luck of the forms of Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, you know, remake with those two games combined into one on the Switch so far, just because it still hasn't got a new release date. And on top of that, we've now basically sorted out with the forms of the release date for the sake of the forms of Sonic Origins, and now that particular game now got a trailer ever since about a week ago and all that stuff. So yeah, you probably get the idea about that. So actually, kind of thinking about it, I think I'm actually missing something here. So in this case, let's hold over to the back of the bench here, because what if I first got there? I will have to be honest, I did actually miss some of those Leon souls for quite a few times until I noticed that particular shiny object can be very well hidden at the back of the forms of the bench sometimes. So, because for the longest time, I couldn't swear there was actually going to be something related to enemies or certain obstacles you could have to find, but it was just the fact that, well, relatively speaking, it's just the fact that you always have to keep an eye on the forms of certain exploration factor around here. So, oh yeah, every once in a while though is the fact that we actually stumbled across those certain enemies just managed able to actually got themselves the forms of somewhat of a darkness effect, which means about the fact that that actually contains Leon's soul inside of it. So yeah, that basically explains about the fact that, well, I think the amount of the forms of those Leon souls you can have to collect throughout the majority of the world, I think there are a grand total of, once again, I get this strong sense of feeling, 300 of those things. So in addition that after the events of where we try to find all 300 Waddle Dees throughout the regular main worlds, we need to collect another 300 of those godforsaken things. But regardless of such though, they're pretty easy to get. So as a result though, nothing to do with the forms of mission objectives this time around, because obviously we've pretty much done every single missions of this game offers us to. So no need to deal with the forms of you know, trying to get a certain amount of things and try to use the correct copy ability in order able to deal with the forms of certain boss encounters, including mini bosses here and there as well. And on top of that, do not get hit by certain enemy encounters or boss fights. So yeah, that basically explains it from here. So as you can see, as far as if you do manage to able to collect all of those Leon souls in certain segments of the world or certain segments of the level, basically Alphaline just somehow tells us about the fact that well, basically after when you find every single of those Leon souls in certain segments of the whole level, basically Alphaline just somehow managed to tell us we found every single souls in that specific segment of the level. So I think relatively speaking, it's just the fact that with all that being said though, in Isolated Isles Forgo Dreams, as far as the actual world pertains, basically it's all about every single segment of the forms of certain levels in each world. So like for instance, in the forms of Forgo Plains, it's obviously based off from World 1, which is essentially natural plains. And as a result though, until later on though, that it'll just it kind of feels like a combination, like I said, with the forms of this similar concept as in inverted stages from Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time. In addition to that though, with the forms of certain segments for the majority of the forms of some other side modes, like for instance in Kirby Superstar Ultra, which is to be more specifically with the forms of Meta Nightmare Ultra, that basically you have to go through every single level segment without needing to be able to actually go into, well, I don't know about you, because it has been about quite a few days since I actually just managed able to play Kirby Superstar Ultra, because I'm still in a process of the forms of trying to able to actually access to the secret movie, which actually contains the Super Nintendo original movie cinematics, but I always having a hard time with the forms of certain, well, characters to able to actually take on new forms of Helper the Hero mode, because, well, I did manage to complete most of them anyway, but I didn't actually complete every single one, just because, well, usually relatively speaking, in order to able to actually access the secret movie, you have to be sure you need to able to actually complete it, every single, you know, runs for the sake of the forms of Helper the Hero mode when it comes to likely for, you know, Boss Arena, except with all that, well, you know what I mean. So, anyway, so today's day is of course the 29th of April today, in this case in 2022 today. So a few things we want to talk about, and that is the fact that, well, relatively speaking, first of all, Nintendo Switch ports for the Nintendo Switch has recently came out today for everywhere else, including European, as well as the forms of America and Japan as well. So because of that though, I haven't exactly looked upon that much of those reviews of Nintendo Switch ports just yet, but hopefully as soon as I get back into, let's just say until when I start able to do some more uploading schedules on, let's just say Mario Party 8, then I'm sure enough I will try and mention more details about that during that specific time. And on top of all that stuff though is the fact that, relatively speaking, about the fact that, yeah, unfortunately though, as far as what someone else did, or somebody, always commented on me on something, Now, I've already known about what this is going. That is the fact that, yeah, unfortunately though, that the Super Mario Bros. Animated movie has been delayed until specifically next spring, until in 2023. I mean, what is this? Now we actually got ourselves the delay of Breath of the Wild 2, and now we got ourselves a delay of the Mario animated movie. So because of that though, honestly, I'm gonna be alright with this, especially noticeable about the fact that, well, let's just say, it's kind of like the same deal as the forms of how it does it on Sonic the Hedgehog the movie, specifically the first film, when back in the forms have been, almost 3 years ago, where they did manage to show us the first ever trailer, and oh god, the first movie's first trailer is awful, because obviously with the forms of, although, don't get me wrong, I actually enjoyed the trailer back in the day, except for that one fatal flaw, or actually technically 2 flaws with it. That is the forms of how the fact that, well, the biggest highlights for the first trailer, for me though, is definitely by the forms of Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik, which he was definitely the biggest highlight of the film, especially noticeable he was the star for the actual best, you know, comic relief kind of villain or something like that, I have no idea, but I digress. And also about the fact that I do like, some of his machines and all that stuff though, that he can able to contract with. And then, as far as I'm aware, everything else on the first trailer though, is just really awful. Like, Sonic's design back in 3 years ago is just, ugh, it just looks way off. And on top of all that stuff though, is the fact that, relatively speaking, well, you know what I mean when it comes to the point where, they just, for some reason, just managed able to choose, Gregster's Paradise for the sake of the forms of that, well, very out of place music. Although, don't get me wrong, I found the track okay, but it doesn't really fit well enough for the sake of the forms of the first ever Sonic trailer, for the sake of the Sonic first movie and stuff like that, so... But I digress. And, as far as I'm aware for that point, and that is the fact that with the forms of the Super Mario Bros. Animated movie, that, hopefully it'll take a lot of time to try able to actually decide able to recap all the forms of the actual, well, I don't know about you, because despite the fact that the actual trailer is not up yet, but that's okay, because it does need a bit some time to able to actually just to get used to with the visuals and all that stuff, but usually relatively speaking, because other films are usually take much more expensive to make, especially noticeable after the events of, well, basically everything else besides, so... But I digress. And also another thing I want to discuss upon, and that is the fact that, do you guys do know about the fact that there is technically another Pinocchio movie just managed able to came out during the course of a year ago, or technically like a couple of months ago in America, which appears to be Pinocchio: A True Story, which... yeah, it's really awful, especially noticeable that unlike its superior Disney counterpart, that basically is the fact that it's been made by the forms of a Russian film company, which, oh gee, no wonder why a lot of people seem to really hate Russian these days now, especially noticeable after the events of Ukraine and Russian war at the moment, which it never stops. So as a result though, I just have no idea that Russians just somehow have a personal vendetta against with. Well, it's hard to explain because I know it has been such a long while since I actually mentioned about the forms of the war that's been going on during the course of, you know, the Ukraine and Russian. So as a result though, yeah, I can totally see why that most people seem to able to be very cautious not to go to the Russian, because as far as I'm aware, well, aside from the only good thing about Russian to me though, is the fact that they did host the Winter Olympics back in the forms of 8 years ago, which appears to be by the forms of Sochi. So, aside from all that stuff though, yeah, I can totally see why I just refuse to go to Russian, because, or Russia, just because, well, it's just about the fact that it's actually gonna build a bit disjointed and all that stuff, as well as the forms of some harsh ideas for, well, yeah, it's hard to explain because I don't feel like talking about it because, well, I just don't want to go there. Because obviously I just get a horrible bad story with the forms of, well, it's hard to explain. So anyways, let's go down here, because I get the feeling there might be a secret passage to able to actually just get up there, and hopefully we can able to deal with that particular enemy from here to grab the forms of that particular Leon Soul right here. Oh yeah, most of the time with the forms of those Leon Souls, sometimes you're able to come across into one piece of the soul, and then most of other times you will come across into 3 all at once. So because of that though, but there's also the way that in each and every single segment of the actual level, there were a few times that you will come across into the forms of the 5 Leon Souls all at once. And where do you find the other 5? Well, basically though is the fact that after we're done with this particular segment of the level, then basically, much like the forms of how it does it on certain other Kirby games ever since in Kirby Superstar Ultra, specifically Revenge of the King side mode, basically though is the fact that you will come across into the harder versions of certain bosses that we've already fight against. So as a result though, that oh yeah, every once in a while though, there were a few times that you will come across into those rare stones every once in a while, which actually is another alternative way you can able to actually just to go after those rare stones, in case if you're about to try to able to power up your copy abilities and all that stuff though, especially noticeable about the fact that with the other thing, I would like to save that conversation until for later. So for now on though, this level is pretty self-explanatory. Well, aside from the fact that other times you will come across into other new obstacle courses that you've never actually seen before, ever since in the main worlds. So yeah, that pretty much explains it. So anyways, let's grab that Maximus motto, and let's go ahead and equip the forms of the Masked Hammer, so we can able to take on the first boss on this world, or technically speaking, the forms of a reincarnation of the forms of Gorilla Mondo, and this time he's actually in Phantom. So in this case, Phantom Gorimondo. So yeah, basically, like I said, it's like the harder version of the existing boss fights that we've already fight against ever since the very beginning of the game. So relatively speaking, that the defense is actually a little bit more higher than the forms of how it does it on the previous version. So because of that though, thus he attacks way more often this time. So basically, for example, he now causes the shockwaves if he decides to able to pull off some stumps and stuff like that. And on top of all that stuff though is the fact that, relatively speaking, is the fact that he's actually moving a lot more faster than the forms of how it does it on the previous version. So, but honestly though, with the forms of that particular, you know, copy ability upgrades and stuff like that, that I still classify for saying that these bosses might be still a bit tad easier, especially noticeable if you already deal with these bosses before, except the fact that it has more attacks than the forms of how it does it back in the forms of in the beginning of the game. Like, as you can see, as soon as you're able to actually decide to able to do a spin attack, basically every once in a while though, he now decides to able to summon not only those rocks, but also tornadoes with it too. So as a result though, yeah, it makes it a little bit more of a challenge. So basically, because of the forms of how the fact that since we on the forms of the second half of the game, so this means about the fact that the majority of the world might actually be a little bit harder than the forms of how it does it on the forms of the first half of the game. Essentially because of how the fact that just try to get used to with the game's mechanics and all that stuff. And unfortunately, I've almost gonna able to actually lose my half health potion. But luckily though, we did manage to finish him off by a little amount of health left from my half of my health upgrade, I guess. So basically, if you do with the forms of that particular boss fight at the very end of certain levels, then obviously, like I said, you get the 5 remaining Leon Souls. So, yeah, that's how it goes, basically. And every time you collect all of those Leon Souls in each and every single level, basically it says, got all pieces. So in this case, you're basically done with the actual level. However though, there are a few times though you will come across into those blue capsules, as you can see right here, for those, you guessed it, getting more figurines and stuff like that. So relatively speaking though, it's just the fact that we pretty much expect about the fact that we actually now stumbled across all 4 of those different colored capsules. So, yeah, that's basically how it goes. I feel like I was about to be able to do 2 levels in each video, for the sake of the forms of this entire world, just in case I can able to actually keep in track of the forms of the video recordings. So, anyway, so let's move on to the next level, which appears to be Forgo Bay. And you might as well guessed it what this world is actually based off from. Basically, this is based off from World 2, which, as far as I'm aware, I know it has been a very long time since I managed able to actually last play this, because, well, relatively speaking, it's just the fact it's been 2 days ago since I actually just managed to play this. But on top of all that stuff, though, it has been a couple of weeks ago, since during the course of how the fact that it has been about a couple of weeks ago since I actually known about World 2 and stuff like that, which, as far as I'm aware, because, like I said, it has been, you know, a couple of hours, or essentially 2 days ago since I actually last played this, basically. So, you know, you get the idea about that. So, anyways, let's go ahead and deal with this particular enemy right here. So, just in case, we'll grab another one of those Leon Souls. Oh yeah, most of the time in certain other levels throughout the game, that, well, to be more specifically in this particular world, sometimes you can either give you either, let's just say about 50, Leon Souls, or most of the time, though, usually 60-ish or something. So, well, as far as I can usually just try to able to speculate and all that stuff, but, you know, you get the idea about that. And I do apologize if my commentary gets a little bit slightly awkward. Oh yeah, the second world in this particular game, specifically what this level's based off from, is actually Forgo Bay Coast. So I just want to classify that because, wow, I just simply managed to able to done researching on certain other world names and stuff like that. So, but I digress. So, and also, as far as I'm aware, since that, for those of you guys who ever lived in Japan, well, happy 10th anniversary of the release of Mario Party 9, at least in Japan. So yeah, I can't even believe that game is now, a decade old, completely, with all these regions and all that stuff combined. Although, mind you, there's also the Chinese version as well, along with the forms of the Korean version, but I haven't exactly looked upon it that much though, just because, well, relatively speaking, I just usually got distracted by the forms of, you know, other discussions and all that stuff. Oh, jeez, I'm almost gonna die right there. But, luckily, we can able to actually decide able to equip our, you know what I mean, with that particular, life up upgrade. So, we can able to actually decide able to, well, I think we should probably able to use that until whenever we get to the next segment. Or maybe we can probably save it for later. So, it could be depend on it, though, because you can obviously just able to save it wisely. So, anyways, let's go ahead and move on to this next segment right here. But usually involves around in a lot of swimming and stuff like that. So yeah, let's go use it right now because I can't afford able to like show you guys the actual the death scene because, well, as far as I'm aware, well, despite the fact that I stumbled across a lot of deaths off screen due to the forms of that godforsaken mission when you have to deal with the forms of Twin Frosty battle from the likes of the forms of the battle at the Blizzard Bridge. That's basically though is the fact that I stumbled across 3 deaths off screen, despite the fact that you don't usually see that on the forms of that particular Let's Play so far. Well, mind you, because of how the fact that I swear I was gonna able to try to do the forms of that particular mission, but most of the time I keep on getting screwed due to the forms of the random unpredictable attack patterns with that particular frosty mini-bosses and stuff like that. So, but that's as far as I can usually think about for the sake of convenience, that is. So, anyways, we got another rare stone thanks to the forms of that particular Space Ranger target as far as aiming cursing as far as this has been concerned with. So, yeah, because best assured about the fact that you always have to keep an eye on with the forms of the visual contact with the forms of that particular targets you must aim for the sake of if you try to able to utilize your, well, you know what I mean with the Ranger copy ability. So, but yeah, for the most part, I think this is all done, all things considered, with all that, well, self-explanatory parts here and there. So, and also it kind of reminds me of the forms of DDD Tour from Kirby Triple Deluxe, as well as the forms of Meta Nightmare Returns for the sake of the forms of Kirby Planet Robobot, where basically, you know, with these 2 side modes combined, that basically it's almost like the mini-sized version of the forms of the exact same levels as you went into, except the fact you were able to play as the ability to play as different characters and stuff like that. Within DDD Tour, you're playing as King DDD the whole time, and then in Meta Nightmare Returns, basically though is the fact that you play as Meta Knight the whole way through. And also it has the exact same functions as the forms of how it does it back in Kirby Superstar Ultra, with all that special abilities and all that stuff, depending on how much blue orb objects you're able to actually stumble across into yourselves. So, but in here though is the fact that you're obviously going to be able to actually play as Kirby the whole way through, which I'm fine with because, you know, Kirby abilities do rocks in this game. So, and also it kind of reminds me of as well with the forms of how it does it in Kirby Star Allies as well, with that particular, like, I would say guest star allies or something like that, or question mark guest star or all star allies go mode, where basically you can able to actually choose between either all of these allies you can able to bring with you within that particular singular playthrough and stuff like that. But usually, relatively speaking, it has been about a couple of days ago since I actually last played Kirby Star Allies, because I'm still stuck on the forms of that particular the Ultimate Choice hardest difficulty, because, well, I just keep on getting screwed over by that one in particular boss fight. Well, to be more specifically, if you go straight towards the very end. Although, for the most part, I did certain boss fights just fine. But, except for that one in particular boss fight that he loves to able to actually just try to throw you off with all that moves and all that stuff. And it's bad enough that you have to deal with that particular hardest difficulty with that particular ultimate choice within a half unit of health. So because of that though, I just classify for saying that that is definitely by far the hardest aspect when it comes to, Kirby Star Allies, as far as I'm usually concerned with. Although so nowhere near as tough or difficult compared to the forms of how it does it on the True Arena in Planet Robobot, because I will say that Planet Robobot's True Arena is by far the hardest. I mean, definitely is the more of the hardest aspect of the entire Kirby series period, mainly because of the forms of the difficulty is like, well, not only impossible, but also about the fact that it's made even much more longer due to the forms of the amount of boss fights you have to stumble across. So, although, relatively speaking, as you can clearly see on screen, that the reason why I keep wandering around like nothing else is because, yeah, somehow, just like the forms of how it does it on certain Waddle Dees throughout the majority of the game, there were a few times that I have to able to keep on exploring around on certain places, because there are a few times that about the fact that with Leon's souls might actually be considered well hidden most of the time. Especially noticeable, you always have to rely on the forms and try to search for those, you know, with the forms of that sparkly effects that we keep on stumbling across into throughout the whole game. Well, basically we have to come across into that quite a lot of times. Luckily though, certain level segments aren't that very long. However though, there are some certain level portions of certain stages that it does manage to able to take you somewhere it feels a little bit more linear. So as a result though, there might be a few times that if you accidentally manage to able to, well, skip over for the entirety of the forms of the Leon Soul by complete accident, well, basically though is the fact that, well, it's hard to explain because it's been about, you know, 2 days ago since I actually last played this, so... But I digress. So, and unfortunately though, much like those Waddle Dees, that if you somehow manage to obtain them with these Leon Souls, you cannot exit the level during the pause menu because you need to finish the level first. So, yeah, it's kind of like the similar thing as the forms of how it does it on the special stage keys from Sonic Events 3 and stuff like that for that nature. So, anyways, let's activate those switches here to able to progress. So, we'll try to avoid those Gordo-like bars that we can able to jump over into. And there's an enemy right there. It's almost like a shadowy version of that particular enemy. But, regardless of such though, we've already dealt with him anyway by utilizing the ice copy ability and stuff like that. I suppose I should probably mention about this as well, I guess, is the fact that most people really do miss certain copy abilities that was not found ever since in the past Kirby games. To be more specifically, where's the beam ability? As well as from that, the mirror and the yo-yo, and as well as the forms of other copy abilities you know as well, because I have no idea why they managed able to downsize the forms of those copy ability amounts. Although don't get me wrong, I found those copy abilities in this game to be a lot more enjoyable, especially noticeable being on 3D and stuff. But usually that most people seem to really do miss the other copy abilities ever since the Kirby games past. So, Yeah, I can totally see why about the fact that, well, relatively speaking, they're always asking about the forms of the speculation of DLC if possible for this game, but we can't able to actually predict on it right now because I was expecting about the fact that there was actually going to be a rumor or a leak of the forms of that particular special themed Kirby's 30th anniversary direct, but no, it didn't happen, so that's kind of a bummer, honestly, because I would love to see the potential future for the sake of the forms of Kirby, because, you know, like I said ever since and during the course of my video game collection video, for the sake of the forms of the Kirby's 30th anniversary special, that Kirby is without a doubt my favorite franchises of all time, because, well, despite it does have some very questionable choices for Kirby Slider for the e-reader Game Boy Advance game, well, despite the fact that, well, luckily in European version, never actually got it. So because of that, though, yeah, it's just there for the sake of the forms of that particular Kirby Slider e-reader game for, you know, for the Game Boy Advance and stuff like that. So, anyway, so let's go ahead and get ourselves the actual ring object. Well, if we're done finishing with that particular hammer swinging attack. So in this case, though, we need to blow those windmills, so just in case we can able to actually get ourselves even more Leon Soul as far as that's been concerned with. So, but again, if you can't afford to able to every windmills, I can assure you there was actually a blue warp star around here somewhere, so that way you can able to actually retry that segment again. At least as far as I can usually think about that. Well, relatively speaking, it's just the fact that I'm just usually guessing and stuff like that. So, okay, so it looks like for the most part we're almost done here. So, yeah, because I just get a strong sense of feeling, yep, there was actually that blue warp star right there. So in case if you're actually missing out on quite a lot of those windmills, then you can able to actually retry that, which it was super generous, especially noticeable that luckily there's not a one attempt kind of thing. So in this case though, I get a strong sense of feeling there might be a last thing I need to find. So in this case, there's one of them. Pretty easy to miss if you have a first time playing this level, so at least that's something, I guess. So anyways, and I think coming up though is definitely the next boss, so yeah. I would like to mention more details about the forms of the fact that there's going to be some another unfortunate news that is about to be happening and during at some point until next month. But I'll save that conversation until whenever we go back onto Mario Party 8, so... Anyway, so hello again, Tropic Woods, except now you're the Phantom version of that particular boss. So here we go, Phantom Tropic Woods, and he was by far the easiest Phantom bosses in the entire game, just because he doesn't do anything at all, aside from the fact that there are a few times that, much like in the extra version of Wispy Woods, back in the forms of in the old days, that basically he summons not only Gordos, but also he now decides to able to put up with the forms of that cage lap with that you have to able to navigate through in order to able to reach straight towards him. So, but in all, still pretty easy though, especially noticeable with that particular, you know, the masked hammer ability as far as I did somehow equipped. So, there he goes, Phantom Tropic Woods. So, still pretty easy though, but hey. And I think, for the most part, that we've almost at the halfway point for the sake of the forms of this entire world. Although, mind you, about the fact that every once in a while, that certain levels on this particular world is going to get much more longer than the forms of how it does it on the majority of the worlds of the game. So, yeah, that probably explains it, so... And that pretty much concludes Forgo Bay. So I believe next up it will be Forgo Park, which is obviously based off Wanderer Remains. So, but then again, I think I should probably save that conversation until, to be more specifically, whenever I discuss onto that, until whenever I go back onto Mario Party 8. So, yeah, with that being said though, we got endings off this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And that is the fact that we'll still continue things on in Isolated Isles, Forgo Dreams, by going through Forgo Park, in this case the third level on this world. So I'll see you guys on not Monday, but Tuesday. So yeah, I'll see you guys then. Later, fellas.